This video is for both new players and veterans of the game, because I won't only explain what each buff and debuff does, but I will also rank them in a tier list. I would also love to hear from you, yes you, as to where you will rank each buff and debuff too. So we're gonna do debuffs right after we do mana, because I think mana is probably one of the most confusing for new players anyways, the confusing buff for new players to understand. When I first started playing backpack battles, I thought mana and stamina were like the same thing, but actually mana is a resource used by magic items. Think of it as like a extra add-on. Think of it as stamina, but for those magic items, basically. So items like blueberries and mana orbs generate a lot of mana, hence the name mana orb, right? And weapons like dark saber, mana thrust, broom, all those use mana in a way to activate their item effects. And there's other weapons too, like Book of Light also uses mana to be invulnerable. So in general, mana could be a very good buff, but my thing is that a lot of those items that I just mentioned, you won't see mana's usefulness early game, because a lot of early weapons, it's hard to get those weapons early round, like weapons before your subclasses, right? I think you might get lucky in the round 3 or 4, but that's you getting really lucky, because the chances of you getting epics, legendaries, and stuff like that is really low. So it does happen sometimes, but it's really not that often. And because of that, I think I might put mana B. Nah, honestly, I'll put it C. Don't get me wrong; those item effects are crazy, but it's kind of hard to generate a lot of mana without a mana orb. And maybe it's just me, but I have a hard time finding mana orbs. I don't know how people are able to just stack up mana orbs. I'm just like, damn, y'all's RNG is insane. I think I'll put mana in C just because it's very situational from time to time. Yes, you can generate mana with blueberries as well. Mana orbs and blueberries are basically the best ways to generate mana. There's other weapons like mana thrust itself. With every hit, you do generate mana, but to get a mana thrust, guess what? You need a mana orb, kind of thing. So I'll put. I wouldn't mind putting it in B. I might move it up to B depending on where I put everything else, right? I think the first buff that we will talk about is poison. So basically poisons do 1 damage for every 2 seconds, and it's really easy to stack poisons, really, especially if you're a reaper. And as you guys probably saw with my class list video, you don't even have to use reaper items to stack poisons. Like pandemonium is another great weapon just to stack poisons. Poisons are so easy to stack. Rangers can dish them out too with their own poison ivy, even though that subclass is kind of I think it's the weakest subclass in the game in general. Poison ivy, that one. But yeah, it's also poisons also play really well with fatigue builds as well. I think all around poisons are a solid debuff in this game. There are a lot of counters. Well, let me not say a lot, but there's a handful of counters to poisons, like the holy armor and even the poison goober, which ironically also deals a lot of poison as well. So there's a handful of counters to poison, but just because it's so easy to stack, and a lot of times I've been able to just keep stacking poisons despite those counters to it, and I think it's a nice debuff to have. So I think we'll put it in B. Again, I wouldn't mind putting it in A. I just want to see where I think about all these other debuffs. I might move it to A, but right now I'm okay with it in B, right? And yeah, the only thing that really scares me whenever I'm playing poison, if I'm playing against like a poison goober or someone who has a lot of carrots, then I'm like, ooh, whoa, what you doing with all those carrots, buddy? And that's usually the first couple of rounds. That's where I'm kind of like hesitant with poison, but it just deals damage, bro. That's the name of the game. It just deals damage every 2 seconds. So I might actually move it to A, but we'll see that later in the video. Maybe. The next one is blinds, right? Blinds basically do what the name tells you. It decreases your accuracy by 5, right? I think this debuff is better with rangers, in my opinion, especially if you're using lightsaber or dark saber with the Yggdrasil leaf, because the Yggdrasil leaf actually gives you regeneration, and regeneration can be converted into blinds with lightsabers and stuff like that. So you just get so many, you could get so many blinds on somebody. So not only are they not hitting you, but you can deal out massive damage in the process, especially if you're a ranger, because you have like crit and luck. So it's just, it can really make you feel overpowered from time to time. But there are a lot of counters to blinds. I think there's more counters to blinds than there are to poisons. Don't quote me on that, but just off the top of my head, you have Book of Light, carrots, but at the same time, it's also easy to get double shovels, which increases your blinds as well. So there's a lot of ways to generate blinds, but there's also a lot of ways to decrease blinds as well. So I'm thinking about this one. I think I'll put it B. I put it behind poison, because poison, like I said, just gives you free damage to begin with. Blinds gives you the opportunity to deal more damage while your opponent can't deal damage, basically. I think that's fair, in my opinion. It's just fair. Again, this is my opinion. I'll leave a link to the tier list down below. So if you guys want to make your own tier list, I would love to see where you guys would rank like buffs and debuffs as well and whatnot. And then the next debuff I'm going to talk about is Code. I think I'm going to put Code in S tier, right? You can get Code through Sapphires, Blue Eyes White Dragon, no Yu-Gi-Oh relationships whatsoever to that one. But yeah, the Blue Eyes White Dragon is a card too. I think its rarity is pretty up there. So it's a little bit hard to get, because first you got to get deck of cards and then you got to roll for it. So it's kind of iffy, right? And then there's Artifact Stone Code, which is also a very unique item. It's rare to get. But like I said, Sapphire gems aren't that hard to get, especially when you try to combine them. I've just been like messing around with the Box of Riches. So I think that's your best bet of getting Code. And depending on how fast your weapon attacks, you might want to put that on your weapon rather than just in your backpack if you're trying to get that Code debuff. So those are your two options with the Sapphire. So if you have a weapon that attacks very slowly, you might want to put it in your bag, especially if it's not a high rarity gem that you have. Or no, if it is a high rarity gem, you probably do want to put it in your backpack. If it's a low rarity gem, you might be able to gamble with it a little bit on a weapon, just off the top of my head. That's just how I feel about it. If you see the other two items, specifically Stone Code, Artifact Stone Code, do everything in your power to get Stone Code, bro. If you got to mortgage your house, sell a kidney, offer up your firstborn child, get Stone Cold. This is it's a game changer, especially if you're already running a build that has a lot of blinds or poisons. It just complements you so well. I can't think of too many counters to Cold. The only counter that I can think of off of my head is Heat, but even then, I think, yeah, if someone's running a build full of Heat, then maybe your Cold is kind of useless. But I don't see that many builds relying on Heat, and I'm currently in Diamond, low Diamond, high Plat. But yeah, that's the area that I'm in, and I don't see too many Heat builds. There are a lot of builds that try to like speed things up, but if you're able to just stack up a lot of Code, especially if you have Artifact Stone Cold and Sapphires, it's a lot easier to stack up Colds, and it will outweigh Heat, just based on my personal experience with that. And then there's also, you can also get Cold. I also forgot to mention, you can get Cold through Coal and Cursed Dagger. And you might be saying, oh, but those are random chances. Right. But with Cursed Dagger and with the Cold item, you have a good chance of getting it, because with the buffs, there's only 3 buffs in the game currently, which are, or debuffs, I should say. Poisons, blinds, and Cold. Those are the 3 debuffs in the game currently. There's also Fatigue, but we'll get into Fatigue later. So that means you have a 1 in 3 chance of getting Cold as well if you use either Cursed Dagger or Cold. So there's a handful of ways where you can stack up Cold in this game, right? So that's why I put it in S tier, because I can't think of too many counters to it. I mean, you have Jinx Torquila, you got fanny packs, but the more you just stack up with it, it just makes those items kind of unimportant, in my opinion. And next, I think for the first buff that we're going to talk about, I think we'll talk about Luck. Luck counters blinds pretty well. It basically gives you 5% increase of accuracy It's typically another item that you can only find, well, not only, but you'll mostly find on rangers. I can't think if there's any way for reapers to generate luck. I can't really off of the top of my head think of one. If there is, feel free to put one in the comment section so other people will. I'll look into it. If there is, I'll put one either on the screen or in the comment section if I ever find an item that reapers can use to generate luck themselves. But it's mainly a buff that you will find on rangers. And since it helps you counter blinds, I think you should put it, I'll put it in A. I'll put it in A. The ranger has a couple of subclasses that can help you generate more luck, mainly the pierce arrow subclass. I think that's the only subclass. I'm not too sure if the use yourself, I don't think the use yourself leaf generates luck. So that's a very strong counter to blinds, and you will eventually, especially once you get to plat and diamond, you will run into people who are using blinds at least one time, at least once. So I think just because of that, you put it in A. And there's so many interesting ways you can use luck with the ranger. So I'm gonna put it in A for now. I'll put it in A for now. And next we have regeneration. I think I'll put regeneration in B, but I could put it in A. Yeah, we'll just put it in B. It's very easy to get regeneration, basically with healing herbs or strong healing potions as well. You can just generate regeneration. You can just generate regeneration. Let me not use the word. Let me not use that phrase. You can gain a lot of regeneration. Let's say that instead. It's strong early game. It can help you win games. Like, healing is so important early game when most people usually just have 1 or 2 weapons. If people have 2 weapons, typically their stamina is going to run out. If someone has 1 weapon, then it could be a long drawn out battle as well. So if it's a long drawn out battle, that's more healing for you. Of course, if you're going against a Goobert, you're going to need a lot of these to out heal a Goobert and whatnot. If you're going against a Pan and you don't really have a band, if all you have is a wooden sword, you're going to get clapped. But nonetheless, in the early game, regeneration is so strong. It's so strong, right? And it's easy to get. It's stackable as well. It's so easy to get stackable, and it works really well with holy items, specifically the lightsaber. But the lightsaber can convert it into other item effects, which can just make that weapon so much more valuable. And then you can also, yeah, you can also generate it with holy armor. I'm not too sure if I mentioned that. There's a whole mess of ways to generate, let me not say generate regeneration. There's so many ways to gain regeneration in the current meta that we're in. So actually, I think I might put regeneration in A. The more I talk about it, the more it makes more sense to put regeneration in A. Regen. I might put it in the top of A, honestly. Yeah, we'll move that. I think this is the top of A when I think about regen. Might be, shoot, I might even put regen in S tier. The only counters that I could think about it is poison, because they kind of cancel each other out. It's kind of hard to stack more regen versus more poison, and there is a lot of poison everywhere. I've been playing ranger, but in low levels. I haven't been getting hurt too bad, but again, regen is strong early game nonetheless. Oh yeah, there's also the Ripsaw Blade. The Ripsaw Blade is a legendary item. Even though it's legendary, I'm not too sure about you guys, but out of all the legendary items, Ripsaw Blade is the most frequently used weapon in my shop. It's the weapon that I see the most in my shop, even though it's a so-called legendary item. Like, I get so lucky getting Ripsaw Blades early. I'm not too sure if you guys experience the same thing, but I think the devs really want people to use Ripsaw Blade. So even though it's a legendary, it's supposed to be a little bit harder to find. I think the devs kind of mess around with the RNG numbers with Ripsaw Blade. So Ripsaw Blade, if you see a Ripsaw Blade, it's literally rip. It's RIP to your regeneration. But I don't see, even though I see it a lot in my shop, I don't see a lot of people use the Ripsaw Blade at all. So I'm still comfortable with putting regen in A tier and whatnot. And next we have, let's talk about spikes. This one's kind of iffy because I think the devs are trying to push for a spike build right now. Before this build, before this patch, I should say, before this patch, I would have put spikes in D. I'm not too sure where I would put spikes right now, but basically spikes deal 1 damage per stack when being hit with a melee weapon, right? Up to 100% of the damage. And I'm not too sure about it because it's definitely not better than poisons, because you have that condition where poisons are, you're going to get guaranteed damage X amount of seconds, whereas with spikes, someone has to hit you first, and it has to be with a melee weapon. So if someone's hitting you with, let's say, a dragon or a bow and arrow, I don't think the spikes will do damage, because specifically they say melee weapon in the description. So that's one thing to worry about. So if you're going against someone who's not really using or dealing a lot of damage with a melee weapon, that's one thing. I think the Staff of Unhealing also counters spikes, as well as the Ripsaw Blade as well. So that's one thing. And it's still kind of hard to generate spikes. Like, maybe if you had spike shields and a lot of pineapples, then we could be talking. It's really nice with a Tusk Piercer. It can, especially if you're running, yeah, of course, because Tusk Piercer is only with Rangers. So if you're running Tusk Piercer with Ranger and you have crit damage and a lot of luck, it could get dangerous, but I'm not too sure. Like I said, I originally put it in D tier. Shoot, you could even make an argument for F tier. I could see some people making an argument for F tier. I think with the recent changes to spikes and the fact that you can generate a little bit more spikes, I'll put it in low C tier. I also wouldn't mind putting it in D tier. And by the way, just because something is in C tier doesn't mean it's bad per se. C's get degrees, you know what they say, yeah, right? So, but if anything's in D or F, I think I just don't care too much about it, or it's really hard to get those items for people. At least that's the way I see it. Next, we have Vampirism. It's kind of like Regen, but it heals 1 HP for whenever you are hitting somebody with a melee weapon, up to 100% of the damage with Vampirism. I think I'll put Vamp in B. There's a handful of counters to Vamp. The most notable one is Garlic, and a lot of people run Garlic, at least if you're a Reaper. I've seen a lot of Reapers run Garlic, so there's that. That's one thing that you got to think about, right? It's a little bit harder to get, a little bit, but you can find items that can just give you Vampirism, especially if you're a Reaper. It's a lot easier to find Vampirism as a Reaper than as a Ranger. I might put this in C. I might put it in C because I don't see Vampirism winning me a lot of games unless your whole build is geared around Vampirism. Like, you have a bloody dagger, you got a blood amulet, you got a blood goober. Like, as a collective whole, if you have all those things, then Vampirism will kick butt. But to get all those things is kind of, it's a long shot, right? RNG has to be really on your side for you to make use of Vampirism. So I'm okay with putting it in C. I can see an argument for B. I might even put it in D. Nah, we're not gonna put it in D. We won't put it in D. But yeah, we won't put it in D. Maybe we might, because it's not really possible to get Vampirism in the early rounds. I can't think of any common weapon that will give you Vampirism. Well, maybe Coal, if you're really lucky, because Coal generates one random debuff and buff in your backpack. But Vampirism is only really useful if you stack it, right? Same with all these buffs and debuffs. Like, that's one of the conditions I'm thinking about, is stackability. And it's really hard to stack Vampirism in the early rounds. You need a handful of epic and legendary items to stack Vampirism. I might put it in D tier. I might put Vamp in D, but just because, like, I can only really see the Reaper class benefiting a lot from Vampirism. The Rangers can get some Vamp, but you have to be really lucky. I might move it down to D if we don't have any other D tier items, which I'm not too sure if we will have D tier items. Next, we'll talk about Heat. Heat triggers all items to move 2% faster per stack. Heat's cool. There's a handful of weapons that can generate heat. Heat just makes things go faster. I didn't realize it was only 2% faster. Like I said, it's a decent way to counter codes. But at the same time, I don't really meet too many people benefiting from heat, at least builds, in my opinion. There's a couple of ways to stack heat, especially if you have dragons, and yeah, especially if you have dragons, but I've never seen anyone have like 10 heat, 15 heat. I rarely ever see that. It doesn't really scare me either, because this is the thing, well, in general, with any item that speeds up weapons, your abilities, and stuff like that, you got to be careful, because once you make a cooldown activate faster, especially if it's a range or melee weapon, your stamina usage is also going to increase as well. So if you have too much heat and not enough stamina potions or stamina sacks, heat can actually bite you in the butt. You'll start to notice like, wow, I'm running out of stamina a lot faster. So with heat, I might actually put heat in D tier, because if you're not careful with heat and you're just stacking heat willy-nilly, it can bite you in the butt. You could make any builds, and I guess I should have prefaced this in the beginning of the video. All these buffs and debuffs can be good if you have the right items and builds together, but I'm just basing this tier list off how common it is for you to get it, and the counters to it, how stackable it is as well. I'm just putting cold as tier just because every time I'm able to get a build to slow people down, I feel invincible. I just feel invincible and whatnot, right? But I think putting heat in D tier, I'm okay with putting heat in D tier, right? Because it's a very double-edged sword kind of thing. It's a double-edged sword basically and whatnot. Next we have empowered. Empowered gives you 1+ damage when stacked. I think it was basically made for that gut sword, aka the impractically large great sword. There's a couple ways for you to get it. You can get it with the topaz gem, the claws of attack after you hit 5 times. Stamina pots give empowered, ruby chunks to dragons. There's a couple of ways to stack empowered. Again, I don't run into too many people stacking empowered. I think I would still prefer it over heat. And I think seeing how we are in a, like, the devs are trying to push for spikes, claws of attack is nice. I think more people are going to start using claws of attacks in their build, because it first of all, it does what it's it does what its name implies. It attacks, and it attacks pretty often as well. So you can stack empowered, but outside of the items I mentioned, can't really think of it. And same thing with the topaz gem. You're gonna have you need the right build for it as well, because like with poison, there's so many ways, and there's so many ways that are common to get poison, even if you're not a reaper. Whereas empowered, you got to be careful with empowered. You really got to sweat your balls off, because I think in the early game, the only way for you to really get empowered is with a claws of attack. Let me check. Yeah, hold on. And I think maybe with carrots. Let me see. So yeah, I just looked it up. So carrots and carrot goobers also give you empowered. So there is a way for you to increase empowered. Like, you can stack empowered. Maybe we put it, because originally I was thinking about putting empowered in D, but I didn't think about carrot goobers and carrots in general. So there is a way for you to stack empowered a lot in the early games as well. And because of that, I think I'll put it in head of vampirism, just because there is early gameplay with it, like reliable early gameplay with empowered. But it, at the same time, it only does give you 1+ damage, and yeah, 1+ damage can actually win you a lot of games early, right? If you're able to stack maybe 1 or 2 or even 3 empowered early game with carrots, carrot goobers, or even claws of attack, that can actually help you win those games. Because early games, a lot of the times, it's just a coin flip. It's just a coin flip. It's whoever's RNG is the stronger. Whose ever gaming chair is better. You're right. That's basically how you win the early games, is RNG, and if you have a better gaming chair than the other person. So I think I'll put empowered in C. I'm okay with empowered in C. We might put vampirism in D. Yeah, we'll put vampirism in D and whatnot. Armor is good. It's just basically more HP, right? There's only a handful of items that can bypass armor, one of which I can think of off the top of my head is Spectral Dagger. I'm sure there's other ways to bypass armor, but overall armor is just good to have. It's just more HP. It's just more HP. The only time where it's not more HP is when people can bypass it. There's a tons of way to generate armor through basically leather armor, your leather armor, holy armor, the stamina, the potion, your potion for it as well. So yeah, there's also strong skin potion, stone skin potion, strong stone skin potion. There's a buttload of ways to generate armor, so it's just more HP, right? I'm not too sure if I would put it in A, because just having a lot of armor doesn't guarantee you wins. It does in the early, like low ranks and even early games. I'm not too sure if I would put armor in A tier. I'm not too sure. I think we'll put it in B. And now we have fatigue. We have fatigue right here, right? And fatigue isn't per se an official debuff or buff, but I just want to mention it because it can act as a debuff. Basically, there's a couple of ways to generate fatigue, but originally fatigue is just a game mechanic that, like, around 17 seconds after the match has started, both players will start taking fatigue damage. But there are certain items like Mr. Struggles and Corrupted Crystal, which is what this is, that just gives out free fatigue damage. There aren't any like hard counters, and when I say hard counters, I mean counters that specifically say you're invulnerable to fatigue. And I think that's a good thing too, because if there was, then it kind of defeats the whole game mechanic of naturally occurring fatigue, mainly because fatigue is just a way to make the game speed up, so there's an end result quicker. There's been a couple of times where I've had like a very long fight just because both me and my teammates, our sustain was so much higher than our attack. But yeah, that's the gameplay mechanic of fatigue, is just to end matches quicker. And it's just free damage. It just gives you out free damage. Like I said, you can get it with the Corrupted Crystal, which both the Reaper and Ranger can use, as well as Mr. Struggles, which is a Reaper specific item, which is one of the reasons why people say Reaper is very fatigue dependent. One of the reasons, at least. And like, I think it's every 5.5 seconds right now is what the fatigue crystal can dish out. The devs have been changing it, so it can change in the future how strong the Corrupted Crystal is and whatnot. But like I said, nonetheless, fatigues are really strong with Reapers. There's no real hard counters to it. You can have some soft counters, like just having more sustain and more regeneration with your build, so those can be considered a soft counter to fatigue. But seeing how there's no hard counters to it and you can stack it pretty well, there's a lot of items out there that can speed up Corrupted Crystals and Mr. Struggles. I think you will have to say fatigue is S tier as well, right? For sure. There's counterplays to fatigue builds, but fatigue itself is just S tier. It's S tier. And before we get away, we'll talk about reflection, which is something very common with ruby eggs and a ruby whelp. I don't think ruby chunks. Yeah, ruby chunks don't have reflection, right? Reflection is cool. It's hard to stack reflection. Usually reflection is at the beginning of the round. Basically any attack that, or any debuff that hits you, you reflect it to your opponent. Mr. Struggles is a 25% chance, which Mr. Struggles is really good in that sense, where Mr. Struggles lets you fight fire with fire. And then with Ruby Whelp, it's more of a, you only get two at the start of the match as well. Whereas Mr. Struggles Reflection, it's a little bit different because it's not really reflection, because you're still going to get hit by those debuffs, but you can also hit other people with that same debuff. So Mr. Struggles is a little bit different than the way that Ruby Whelp works, but I just want to talk about those two, kind of how those interactions work. Reflection is all right. There's no hard counters to reflection. It's okay. I think I'll put it in C. Reflection is okay. It's okay with the Ruby Dragon Egg, and I guess Ruby Egg Reflection, I'll put it in C. Mr. Struggles Reflection, I think I might put it in A. Mr. Struggles Reflect, the way that joint reflects is better, even though it's a 25% chance of it happening. When it does, it's nice. I mean, 25% chance isn't high, but yeah, I guess we'll put it in B. We'll put Mr. Struggles Reflect in B tier, and then the Ruby Whelps or Ruby Egg Reflection in C and whatnot. So yeah, am I missing anything else? I think this is all the debuffs and buffs in the game. Y'all let me know how y'all think about this tier list. I'm sure there's going to be people who would disagree. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Reaper mains out there who are going to say, Poison's A tier, bro. What are you talking about? Mana C tier? I get it. I know. I think me putting mana in C is probably going to be the most controversial thing right here, but I don't have the best luck with mana orbs. You can get mana with blueberries, yes, but you're gonna need more than one blueberry, and blueberries only take up one slot, which is nice. But if you really want to generate mana, you need a mana orb, and if you really want mana thrust and all these other cool mana weapons like spectral dagger, staff of unhealing, you guess what, you also need a mana orb, and I just don't have a lot of luck getting mana orbs. If you do, good for you. RNG's on your side. RNG's not on my side. But yeah, I think I'm happy with this. Like I said, there's a couple of other things that you can move around. I would like to hear you guys' opinion as well as see y'all's tier list for buffs and debuffs. I think the next one we'll do other ones for range weapons and all that other stuff as well. But yeah, y'all let me know how y'all feel about this. Until next time, y'all stay safe and I'll see you guys later.